Hello, my name is Landry from Living Saints, and today is the Feast of the Solemnity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And in honor of that feast, I will be covering every single Bible verse that mentions Mary. Well, not every one, but I will break down the most important ones, and the rest will be on the screen somewhere. Stay till the end. Okay, let's get into it. Nowadays, a lot of Christians minimize or outright deny the importance of Mary in the Christian life due to two illogical arguments. The first argument goes like this: she's not mentioned many times in the Bible, so she's not important. That's an interesting one, so let's break it down and see how flawed that argument is. Is the importance of a character based on how many times they're mentioned in the story or the context in which they're mentioned? Well, let's go for option number one. If we go with that reasoning, most of the apostles are irrelevant because they're not mentioned in scripture too many times. But what about option two? The context in which X character is mentioned. I will use Melchizedek, one of the most important figures in the Bible. He's mentioned just 9 times and he speaks once. Or the apostles again. They're not mentioned many times in the Bible, but they're mentioned in key contexts, and that's how we know they're important characters in the Christian life. The second big flaw in this line of argumentation is that what is the standard to judge whether someone is mentioned enough? Is it 1 times, 2 times, 10 times? It's arbitrary, so the argument doesn't really make sense. Well, now that I showed the weakness of that argument, for argument's sake, I will judge Mary by that standard still. She's mentioned 50 times in the New Testament, whether directly or indirectly, and also in the most key passages in the scriptures. Well, let's dive into the key verses. I broke this part down in 3 segments and grouped the verses to reveal specific theological truths about Mary. The first truth is her intercession. In John chapter 2, at the wedding at Cana, when the wine runs out, Mary goes to Jesus and she tells him they ran out of wine. And Jesus says, "What does that have to do with me?" But then Mary still tells the people, "Do whatever he tells you." So she believed her son would listen to her. And even though his hour had not technically come yet, he still performed the miracle. It shows the power of her intercession in the Christian life. The next verse is Romans 16 verse 6. It says, "Greet Mary, who has greatly labored amongst you." And saints like Saint Louis Marie de Montfort interprets that as referring to Mary, and he emphasizes her participation in the church's work when she was alive and even now that she's in heaven. Truth number 2, Mary as the new Eve. The chapter I'll be looking at today is Luke 1:26-38, and that's the Annunciation, when the angel appears to Mary, and he tells her she will give birth to the God of the universe. This fulfills the prophecy of Genesis 3:15, referring to the birth of the Messiah who would crush the head of the serpent. And if this isn't impressive to you, I don't know what will be, and I will go deeper into this in the next video. The next verse is John 19:25-27, and that's at the crucifixion. When you look at the Gospels, Jesus, when he was on the cross, he spoke 7 times only. And most of the times he spoke, it was to show he's the Messiah and that he's truly the Son of God. But the odd one is where he talks about Mary, and that's in the Gospel of John. Like, out of everything he could have said in his agony, suffering on the cross, he had to make Mary the mother of John while he was on the cross, and by extension to the whole church. And that's a parallel to Eve being the mother of all the living, which is fulfilled in a greater manner in Mary being the mother of the church. Truth number 3 is Mary as the Ark of the Covenant. And the first passage is from Luke chapter 1, verses 41-44. That's at the visitation. That's when Mary goes to visit Elizabeth in Judea. And there's a connection to the Ark of the Covenant arriving to David also in Judea in 2 Samuel. When David sees the Ark of the Covenant, he leaps for joy. And John the Baptist does the same in the womb when he hears the voice of Mary. And also Elizabeth says, "Why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to see me?" And David said the same thing. He says, "How can the Ark of the Lord come to see me?" And lastly, the Ark remained for 3 months with David, and Mary also remained for 3 months with Elizabeth. So there's a big connection right there. The next verse comes from Revelation 11 to 12. The Apostle John mentions the ark that's been missing for a very long period of time, and instead of describing the ark, he describes the Mother of God who appears in the very next verse, and that's no coincidence. Okay, this last verse is the nail in the coffin. But before we get into it, watch this video.
It was there at the cross that Jesus asked John to serve as Mary's son, and John took Mary into his home. Mary was also with the apostles on the day of Pentecost. However, Mary is never mentioned again after Acts chapter 1. The apostles did not give Mary a prominent role. Mary's death is not recorded in the Bible.
The passage we just saw isn't just some random passage, as this pastor made it seem to be. There's a profound typological meaning to the passage. This passage in Acts chapter 1, and by extension chapter 2 as well, is a parallel to 2 Chronicles chapter 5. How? Well, in Acts, we see in the upper room there's Mary and about 120 people. In 2 Chronicles, there's the ark and 120 priests praising God as the ark is brought to the new temple. Then the presence of God comes down to fill the place, marking the beginning of a new era for the Old Testament as God comes to reside in the temple. But in the New Testament, we see God's presence come down to reside in the new temple, which is the heart of the believers, and that marks the birth of the church. All these passages show us four things about Mary. First, she's the new Eve, she's an intercessor, she's the Mother of God, and she's the new Ark of the Covenant. And there's a lot more truths about Mary in scripture that I will get into in some future videos. But for now, God bless you and happy solemnity.